Welcome to the Heart of the Cards, a conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what we're dealt. With your hosts, Dan Green and Eric Stuart.
Hey, Eric, it's great to be talking with you today.
Yeah, you too, Dan. Good to be back. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Indeed, indeed. In this episode, we are going to take the next step on the path of the hero's journey, as outlined by Joseph Cambell. And the focus for our conversation is the road of trials.
Ooh.
In the context of the hero's journey, this is typically the part where our hero has to do something like slay a dragon or climb a mountain. Some of you might be familiar with Greek mythology, and Heracles, or Hercules as the Romans renamed him, had those 12 labors he had to do to make up for killing his children. Long story.
Yeah.
So in mythology, this is what Joseph Cambell is referring to with this road of trials. But of course, all of these have some resonance into what it's like to try to be the hero of your own life, to get through your daily struggles. And one of the consistent themes that as I reacquainted myself with some of Joseph Cambell's writing and mythology in general, is this idea that it's not just one trial. You have to keep your stamina up. You have to keep being resilient. You have to keep going at it, because life is never that easy.
Right.
And I thought I would kick off with an example of something from my professional life, my career as an actor. And then later I'll talk about something from my personal life. Nothing too personal, though, I promise. Mm-hmm. So it won't be that interesting. But I didn't always know that I wanted to be an actor. When I was young, I wanted to be a stuntman, because I thought that would be just so much fun to safely throw yourself off of a 5-story building, or, be set on fire or whatever.
I love that that's what you wanted to be.
Oh, my God. I would say, Mom, look, I can throw myself across the floor. Look. And I would do it over and over and over. And
of course, back then our bones were made of rubber, so we could just bounce back. Right? We didn't realize that there was actually injuries that went along with being a stuntman. I would
never do anything like that now.
Oh.
What's that?
That reminds me, did you have the Evel Knievel motorcycle where you'd rev it up on the little stand and it would take off? Like, remember how big Evel Knievel was? That's how old I am.
Well, but not only did I have that, I worshipped it.
Right?
Yeah.
That was like my favorite toy ever. I mean, he was amazing.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing how many bones he had broken, and it just was like, and it didn't seem like that was that big a deal. I guess that would also help you, your desire to be a stuntman, where you're like, well, if this guy could have 50 bones broken and still be a star and still function and have his own motorcycle toy, then I could do that too.
I can't understand why my mom was so worried, though. I want to be that guy. 50 bones broken. That's me.
That's right.
No, I was totally all into that. So Raiders of the Lost Ark came out when we were kids, and there was this special about the stuntmen, and I was I was totally, a big fan of Harrison Ford, of course, like we all were, but I was even more impressed by the stuntmen and such.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, very cool.
But also I didn't ever think about being an actor, because I didn't want to be an actor. I wanted to be the characters.
Sure.
So anyway, my path to getting into acting, that started becoming a clearer thing when I was in high school, and seeing that it was something that I wasn't bad at, that I had some aptitude for. And then I ended up going to, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, getting an education in acting. And when you graduate from whatever school as an actor, that and they're educating you to be some kind of professional actor, and there's so many wonderful schools in the United States and elsewhere that do these sorts of things. They typically have what they call a showcase at the end, so their graduating class is presented in a favorable way in some scenes that industry people can come and take a look at what's coming out of that school.
Right.
Sometimes that leads to representation, agents, that's managers, that sort of a thing. I could probably describe that whole process as being a trial in and of itself.
Right.
But after getting through that one, again, I guess, there's this idea that there's this trial, and then there's the next trial, and there's the next trial. After I got into Rutgers and didn't get cut, which was something that they did to the undergrads, so and actually graduated and got out there there in quote-unquote the real world, one of my first jobs was understudying a play on Broadway. The actor I was understudying is Robert Sean Leonard, who some people might recognize. He was in the Dead Poets Society. I think that's where he first came to attention. He also was on the show House. He was the guy who was not a jerk in that series. And very nice man, young man when I met him. And he had to go to a wedding the day before or the weekend before the show opened. So as his understudy, I had to know his role before the show opened. And it was a role where his character was on stage 90% of the time. It was set in Ireland, and there were real, authentic Irish actors on stage, so your dialect had to match with theirs. It had to be authentic.
Let's just also say that one of your first jobs was being an understudy to a Broadway show. Okay, let's just say that.
That was fun. Yeah,
but that's very impressive.
Thank you.
I'm very impressed with that. I mean, that's that to a lot of people would even just be the pinnacle of like if I could just accomplish that, and that's still something just to strive for.
It was great.
But right out of school, that's very impressive.
Well, actually, to just toot my horn a little bit more, that was the second job I had understudying for the same company, for the Roundabout Theater Company. The first job I had with them, which was literally the show that was right before that, was a production of Hedda Gabler, which is a classic play by Ibsen. It's very depressing. And I was understudying somebody who was supposed to be about the same age as Kelly McGillis, because she was featured in that production, a production which also had Laura Linney, who later became her own star, a wonderful actor. Yeah. Laura Linney actually gave me advice on which agency to sign with. And I'm not saying anything about Kelly McGillis's age at that time, other than it was much older than my own. So that they even gave me that job was a little bit of a stretch. But the company knew that they could rely on me to know the lines and whatever. Great. But I never performed in that show. But with Philadelphia, Here I Come, it was in the cards. So, not to make a pun on our own title here, but that I was actually going to perform. So, which they told me the first day that I showed up, because they knew I really needed to be ready. Anyway, so there are all those challenges of the dialect, and the role is an enormous role, a virtuosic role. You got to do a lot of emotions, and the other stipulation that made this trial even more challenging. So, and just, to frame it from my perspective, I had never lived in New York before. I'm in my early 20s, and there's this starring role that I'm supposed to, theoretically seamlessly step in and portray. And but another kicker was that because of the rules of how theaters are run, and everybody has a union and there's certain protocols, I'm not complaining about those. Those should be there. But what that meant was that I only got to have one run through with the real cast.
Right.
Before actually performing in front of an audience.
Exactly. Yes.
I couldn't even rehearse on the real stage.
Right, because of the union rules in terms of
because that stage needs to be protected. There's other things that need to be observed.
Right.
So, but I understood that long before I had to actually take the stage. So I knew how prepared I had to be. So it was a process of watching all the rehearsals and understanding why the director was giving Robert Sean Leonard the direction he was giving him, because that was a discussion about what the character needs to do. I couldn't then take those directorial notes and then run it by the director to see if I was, getting his direction correctly. But I had to, really pay attention. And I learned a lot from watching Robert Sean Leonard do the work. And I didn't rip off his performance. Instead, understanding structurally what the beats needed to be for the character, because as an actor, you are setting up your other actors, just like, as in a band. You can't have the drums cut out all of a sudden, or else it's a completely different song, right? So anyway, I had all of those challenges, and it was enough to, maybe drive somebody crazy, but I just focused on what it was that I had to achieve, what my function was, not how all of this reflected on to me, but what was my mission, what was my job, and which I think is a very useful thing, especially in the context when we're talking about creative stuff. Creative stuff, I think, can very easily live in a land of feelings and ideas and concepts, and it's a very immaterial sort of thing, and I'm not saying that in a disparaging way. That level of engagement creatively with ideas is fruitful. When it comes to performing something, you got to get a job done. There is an achievable thing that needs to happen, right? And I think that's a great crucible to burn off all of those excess ideas and boil it down to make some heating metaphors, what it needs to be. Anyway, and I remember so distinctly being there in position on my first performance, which I believe was a matinee. Thank God, it was on the weekend.
How many shows did you do?
I covered for a weekend, which meant 4 performances.
Great.
But the show was so well reviewed that they extended the run. And fortunately or unfortunately, Robert Sean Leonard had a movie he had to go do, so I took over for the show.
Great, but for that,
I took over for him in the show, his role in the show.
But for that sort of like window of having to rise to the occasion, you filled in for the entire weekend,
right? And then after he
did multiple shows,
and then after he left, I had just another week. But they couldn't extend it too long. But anyway, so I'm in position, and I just have chills thinking about it. So I'm in position. The house is dark, meaning the house lights are dark, meaning the whole theater is dark, right?
Oh, could you? Because since I'm not a stage like a stage actor, but I mean obviously I perform on stage, but as a musician. But can you explain to our listeners what in position means?
Oh, sure. That's like places, please. That's another term that's used. So everybody has a place that they need to be for a show to be able to start, and everything that happens over the course of that show it's all highly planned and organized activity, behind stage as well as on stage.
So, and a lot of people might not know, there's very specific what they call blocking, which is basically the patterns of movement on the stage. All of that's obviously rehearsed and worked out. And anyway, so I was in my position for the beginning of the show. And I think I mentioned also, it's the kind of role where you're on stage 90% of the time. So it's not like at any point during the run of the show, except for the act breaks, I'd have time to recoup or refocus. You're really, once you're on that roller coaster, you're taking that ride. So, so there I am, and it's completely dark, and I can't remember my first line.
Of course not.
Thank God when the lights went up and I actually started moving, I was like, oh, and now I say this.
You had too much time. You had
maybe.
you had too much time to think about it.
Yeah. So I fortunately did not have to change my underwear for bad reasons. I did not poop myself.
Unless I was part of the role.
Right. And after that trial, if you will, I was sitting in my dressing room after the run of the show, and I was just thinking like, okay, I got through it. I didn't make any obvious mistakes. I remembered all of my lines. I think I actually at some point had a little fun up there, and which is not usually your experience your first time through a performance. Again, for people who may not, because they haven't done theater, it takes a while before you feel like you really are comfortable in the performance that you're giving. Mm-hmm. That's just a natural progression. And I was surprised that even within that limited context, I ended up having some fun. Well, I didn't anticipate that the cast was going to come by my dressing room and congratulate me. And I think that might be one of my most favorite memories, not because they said nice things, but because it was so unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of the actors that I most admired, she said, well, of course you did fine in the first act or whatever, but you just kept on relaxing and relaxing throughout the show, and by the third act, you were just so relaxed. And I was like, yes!
Right.
Yes!
Yes.
Because to me, that was the mark of what I was taught I should do as a creative.
Mm-hmm.
Get up there, do your work, but also bring yourself to it, right? And relax.
Right.
The audience is going to relax with you.
Yeah, and I think that you would probably feel more of the pressure, per se, from the cast.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't want to they're the ones that I most want to honor.
Right. And knowing you the way that I know you as a friend, I know that that's an important a place for you in terms of being part of that team and not letting down your fellow actor or your teammate, that sort of thing. And that was probably, the pressure there. But also what I think is kind of interesting about live theater that's to me why I appreciate it so much, and it's scary to me in concept, but I appreciate it so much, is that, yes, you have your script, but each night is different. Even if you followed the script to a T, right? Monday night,
it's supposed to be alive.
Tuesday night is going to be a different performance based on than Wednesday night. Whether it's the energy from the audience or it's the energy you have on stage with each other, and sometimes people make mistakes and get off script, and how you get back into it. And I think the more you are relaxed and in the character, the more you know how that character would think if presented with a line that wasn't in the script.
Right.
To get back to the script. So there's a scary thought about the fact that you were put in this position of, okay, now it's all on you.
Yeah. You
got to take this on. But the other thing is it's also kind of exciting of like, well, if this is what I'm supposed to do, if this is my calling, then this is part of it.
For sure.
But that sounds, it's great that you got that feedback too from the cast, because I do think that is probably the goal, is that your team feels like, hey, you didn't let us down. It was a great performance. It was solid, and it helped us do our job.
Right. Yeah, that was really affirming.
Yeah.
Also, to just circle back to an element of what you were just talking about, in this context, that is a career-related story, so implicit in that is that I'm pursuing something I want.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pursuing something that gratifies me in a way that I find so compelling, I want to spend the rest of my life doing it. Mm-hmm. And having that motivation, having that gravity which you're falling toward is essential to get you through those trials. I could have given up in certain ways that I didn't, and ended up failing in ways that I didn't, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I could have not taken the dialect as seriously. I could have not taken the lines as seriously. And so many different ways that I could have just phoned it in,
Mm-hmm.
And if I did a really substandard job, I would have a lot of excuses to hide behind.
True.
Well, I didn't really get to rehearse with the cast, just one run through. And
well, you bring up another interesting point, which I've experienced with some of my compatriots in the arts. They also create those excuses.
Yeah.
They also create those situations so that they have an excuse for not doing the job well, or not living up to that challenge.
But when something is really burning in you, it helps get you past those challenges are still there, but you have fuel in the tank. You
mm-hmm.
can surmount them, or at least you feel that you can, which is maybe even more important than actually being able to.
Yeah. No, it's great.
That's
great. That's a great story. Very good. Very good.
As an independent production company, Andromeda greatly benefits from the support of its audience. If you're able to contribute as little as $1 a month, consider going to our Patreon page. Any support you can give means a lot to us creators, and we're excited to bring you more. Visit AndromedaProductions.com and see what's in store. If this is content you enjoy, please like, subscribe, and share on YouTube.
And you?
Well, yeah, you bring up some interesting concepts there, with both talking about the trials of in the career-based side, and then of course in the personal side. For me, career-wise, the challenges, the nervousness, the pressure, those situations have happened for me more from the music side than they have on the acting side. I've definitely auditioned for things as a voice actor that I would love to have obviously booked, but I've never felt like that was the reflection on me, Eric Stuart, as I didn't live up to that. Because I guess also coming from the other side of the glass, being a casting director for so many years, a producer, I understood what went into those decision-making.
Fill that out a little bit for our listeners, because not everybody has that perspective.
my first job in a recording studio. I basically made coffee and took the trash out. And then I went from being a production assistant to being an assistant casting director to then a casting director and then a producer for radio and TV commercials. So I ran casting sessions. I directed actors. I dealt with clients, advertising agencies mostly. And if you are pursuing this career path, if you are trying to become an actor, especially in the commercial world, the things that go into the decision making sometimes are so outside of what your talent is. It could be something like, oh, that guy was really good, but he reminded me of my ex-boyfriend, and I had such a bad relationship with that guy. I couldn't work with this guy for even though he did the best job because it would remind me of this past experience. And of course, as the casting director, you turn around and you say to the client, well, I'm sorry that you had such a terrible time, and I'm glad that you've gotten through that and moved on to another relationship. But if he's the best person for the job, I'm the one that has to direct them for the show or whatever. You could just approve it from like your desk and just listen to the audio, right? But I mean, I've experienced enough of that and strange things. I mean,
Sure.
Sometimes it's two people are really, really good, but one is really good for another character in something, and you're like, well, they sound too similar, so we can't use them both. So unfortunately, we can only use one of the really two great actors, and then we have to pick a second choice that maybe is not as good because that person sounds different.
Right.
So when you hear all of these things, and then you are also pursuing this as a way to supplement your income. And also, I mean, I love acting. I love voice acting. But it's definitely a way I pay my bills with that. It gives me the freedom to do other things that I truly, I feel like if I didn't do, which is like songwriting and playing music, that I would lose my mind,
Sure.
which I've already done.
Sure.
But, obviously that's
But that helps. That helps your art,
Yes.
though.
Yes. So, and also I love the challenge of, being presented with a script, a cold read, come up with a character at the, right on the spot, figure out a way to interpret someone else's words as if they're your own. That's all great. But because of that experience, when I would go up for auditions or things like that, I would do them and forget them. I would basically, you could ask me the next day what I auditioned for the previous day, and I would probably say something like, there was this bank thing, and then there was I don't remember, one thing made me laugh, and yeah.
Well, at a certain level, too, this comes to mind, you're referencing a bank thing. So, that makes me think of the gazillions of radio commercials or whatever, internet commercials, or even TV commercials that are out there. And generally on that level, everybody's good.
Right.
Everybody who is auditioning is good. So there's this subjectivity thing that you were talking about before. You never know.
Exactly.
So you are right to forget that.
Right. So with that side of it, the pressure wasn't really there. It would be nice that every time I went out for a job, I booked it. That would be fantastic.
But for you, the trial would be more related to your music because you hold that more dear.
Right, and also the idea that is especially with music. Like I feel like when you are pursuing being a storyteller, like a singer-songwriter, not just I'm not just singing and I'm not just playing guitar, and I'm trying to create a story and then present it, with my performance, with my voice. So it becomes very personal. If someone doesn't like a song I wrote that someone else performed, I could also say, well, the song's good, but that's a terrible version of it. Or they might like the performance and go, wow, that person really took your terrible song and turned it into a great song because they're a fantastic singer, much better than you are. So, but when you're doing it all, when you're doing all of it, the feedback and the critique can really become you can fall into that trap of hearing all of these comments and taking them all so personally that you could be sort of crippled by that.
Yeah.
And so
because the material is so much you.
Exactly.
Nothing to hide behind.
And so, yes. And I'm not saying that those that are, professional sidemen or things like that taking anything away from that. They're still interpreting the songs. They're still making it a personal choice.
Definitely an art form. Yes.
But it's a different
one.
To me,
it's a different one.
A different one. Yes. So I felt like when I was pursuing what I was doing, I always felt like there were better singers than I might be. There might be better guitar players. There might be but what I did as me, I felt very confident that I was doing. I was presenting Eric Stuart the best that I could present Eric Stuart. And so one of the ways that I dealt with the fear or the nervousness or the challenge of that was, instead of trying to be great at everything that has to do with my genre of my choice of art form, be really good at the things that I, bring that spectrum in, and just be like, if this is where you are, this is what you do, what category you fall under, be really good at that, and surround yourself with people that are really good at the other things.
Right.
I don't play lead guitar, so I've always worked with incredible lead guitar players. I can play rhythm guitar. I couldn't play a lick of lead. So I remember going from I was playing in little clubs all along Bleecker Street in New York City, which is, of course, no longer the place where all of these clubs are. Actually, more banks than clubs now, but unfortunately. But, basically you had rock clubs all next door to each other. You had about 15 or 20 of them.
And now they're bank clubs.
Yes, which don't have as good a music choice. It's all that music.
Not at all.
Yeah. But I would be playing in there, and I played there a lot, and what my goals were things like playing the slightly bigger club on that street, or playing the one that has a little bit, maybe it would pay us a little bit of money, but it was mostly because I wanted to move up that sort of like short little ladder of, well, now I'm not just playing like that dive bar, I'm playing a bar. And then the bar goes up to, I'm now playing a club. And then, look, that club actually has a stage. Oh, this is, these are the kinds of things, right? There was never like, one day I'm going to play Madison
You were literally
Square Garden.
going through it in different stages. Right.
Very good, very good. So I remember being in a position where my managers, who were, actually younger than I, which was very interesting, by a couple of years, said, we have an opportunity for you to open a big show in the area for Chicago and Hall & Oates.
Wow.
They want an acoustic opening act. And I was like, wow, this is cool.
For some of our listeners, I should clarify, they were a group of two guys, and they did songs that were popular.
Yes. Okay. So I thought about, like, okay, when these kinds of things get presented to you, I feel like you need to be prepared for anything in this world when it comes to that, right? Yeah. You stepped up when you were hired as an understudy, and then the opportunity was you were going to take the lead. Well, that's pretty much expected. Like, even if that never happened, you were ready for that. You were ready for that opportunity. So when they said, we're going to do two shows at two giant venues in the New York tri-state area. So one was, at that time, it was called PNC Bank Arts Center. And that held about 15 to 20,000 people. And then the other one was Jones Beach, which, of course, growing up in New York, Jones Beach was where you saw all the rock concerts. It's a beautiful venue on the water, and it's just a great space. And that probably was like maybe a 10,000 seater venue. So I remember preparing the set, what I was going to do. Some of the local newspapers did some articles talking about the show, which was very exciting to, see my name and face in the press like that, which was new for me. And that was kind of cool. And, a couple of interviews. I was like, oh, that's great. And I remember driving up. The first show was going to be the one in New Jersey at PNC. And I remember driving up to the venue. And now this was a union house, speaking of union, which means that, like, certain things, like the artist can't necessarily carry their own gear onto the stage.
Sure.
It's all about liability and the jobs that those guys have, safety issues. Great. So I walk in and I've got two guitars with me, and they're like, two guys come up and they're like, we'll take that from you. And I'm thinking, okay, this is weird, because that's not the kind of experience I've had before. and they set the stuff up for me. I do a sound check. I look at this beautiful venue. I mean, it's a giant amphitheater. It's a huge shed. It's like, rows of seats and then lawn seats. And you're thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. And then I went downstairs and I'm in my dressing room and I've got Chicago is in one area of the backstage, that band, and then Hall & Oates is in another area. And, when you're a solo artist doing these kinds of things,
right.
You basically don't have many people to talk to, but you also are not intrusive if you go into the cafeteria area to have something to eat with all of these bands, because you're not walking in there with your entourage. You're basically walking in there with your tour manager or whatever. So I got a chance to have a conversation with actually a fellow Nashvilleian, John Oates.
Oh, wow.
And so I didn't get a chance to really talk to Daryl. Daryl was doing his thing, but John was so approachable. And he kind of saw that, it's just me. And he started asking me some questions about music and songwriting and
wow.
And really made me feel at ease. I think of nervousness as energy, and you could either have it destroy you, or you can save that energy and use it for something positive. So we're having this conversation, and he's like, listen, it's just some words of advice, keep your songwriting, royalties and your publishing and this and that. And here's some of the mistakes we made, and here's some of the things you shouldn't do. It was really a little education, and now I'm only doing 2 shows with them. He didn't need to speak to me. I'm
That's
basically
so cool.
the local, I'm
Right, right.
local opening act, right? He doesn't even need to address me there, but he was really, really sweet. And so my trial was this. So the nervousness that I felt about, okay, it's close to showtime. And the way that they do this stuff in these kinds of venues is you basically sit downstairs in your dressing room and there's a little speaker on the wall. And when they call you, you come up to the side of the stage to come on to perform. So I'm not standing on the side of the stage waiting until they tell me to. I got to stay out of the way. So I got my guitar tuned. I'm all dressed up. My manager's taking a couple of pictures of me, just for the scrapbook. And so they call my name, and I'm walking upstairs, and before this though, let me just step back a little bit. The way that I deal with pre-show jitters, because if any performer tells you that they don't have nervousness before a show, they're lying to you. I mean, it's just part of it. So what I do is I like to turn off the lights in the dressing room and take a 20-minute power nap.
Wow.
No one talks to me. I actually shut down completely. I sit down in a chair, put my feet up. I don't, it's not like I'm lying down in a bed somewhere. And I close my eyes, and I just, no noise, no nothing. Just basically center myself, relax, and save up that energy for the opening song. And so I hear my name called. I get up, walk upstairs, and of course the curtains are pulled. I know how big the venue is because I saw it empty earlier that day.
Right.
But I have no idea what it looks like to walk out in front of, 10 to 15,000 people. So the curtain opens. They introduce me, and the curtain opens and they introduce me, and you get a little bit of cheering because you're there. But
sure.
Now I only play original material, so I'm playing music these people have never heard before.
Right.
I introduce myself, I tell them I'm local, I tell them who I am, and I play the first song. And of course I am definitely excited because it sounds great. There's a big stage. It's way too much. It's way too big for the fact that I'm standing there's no band. But I wasn't afraid to do what I needed to do. But what really gave me the affirmation that we're talking about is I finished the first song, and because of the size of the crowd and the distance between the front row and me, it was delayed, but the cheer that came back, the whole stadium cheering, excuse me, came back and hit me.
Nice.
I was like, okay, this was the litmus test. if you get this opportunity to step on this stage, opening for these two legendary acts with more top 10 hits than I could even count.
Right.
And you're playing your own music and you get that kind of response, then you belong there. If
Yes.
you don't get that kind of response, maybe this is not where you're supposed to be.
Think about
And
that
so
waitering job.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
But it was so thrilling because I kind of knew that in the back of my head that I was testing. I was testing to see if this was the right thing. And when I finished, I was excited. I could have played more songs. And then the next night, it was a whole different experience because it was back-to-back performances.
Uh-huh.
And when we went to Jones Beach, yes, of course I was nervous to walk out on that stage. I had just had a really good night the night before. Am I going to have a repeat performance? Am I going to break a string?
Sure.
Am I going to forget the words?
Sure.
It was a blast. It was a different kind of hang. It was
Right.
like, backstage was more relaxed and the confidence was the building of the confidence was there. So, but that I remember that moment, that sound. I mean, it's so ingrained in my brain as that trigger of like, yes, do this. But that was my career trial.
Right. That's amazing, and to be able to receive that kind of energy in that way, that sounds like magic to me.
Yeah, it was.
That sounds
It was a
amazing.
blast. I mean, it really was. I definitely felt that having that opportunity, and also, I finished the set and I'd go out in front and I listened to both of those bands perform, and that's when I said to myself, "Wow, I really have to step up my game." But these guys have so many hit songs. Like, I was like,
But
wow,
that's-
and you see the crowd singing along with them,
Yeah.
I mean,
But
those are
that's
moments
the kind
where
of
you-
challenge you want, though.
That's right. That's
'Cause
where you
it'll-
say, you know what?
it'll
I want
drive
to
you.
do this.
Yes,
Yep, that's
it'll
right.
drive you.
That's right.
And it is intimately related to the kind of thing that you only want to become better at. It's
That's
not
right.
it's not a trial of like, well, at least once this is over with, I'll never have to look at that again. Which is
Oh,
a whole,
no.
which is a whole other
And
thing.
no. And once you catch that bug, once you catch that performance bug, I mean, to me, that's the thing about what I was saying about the live theater, the thinking on your feet or changing up songs based on the way the audience is responding or whatever it is. That energy is exciting. I mean, that's what makes that art exciting. It is just being in a live performance of any type.
And another thing I think that's worth saying about these two examples that we just talked about, they are career-oriented. At that point, we knew that we really wanted to do this kind of creative expression. And those are different than other trials, which we're going to talk about next. But this part one of our conversation, this career stuff, there's a unique challenge within it because unlike the life stuff that we're going to talk about next, with career stuff, no one's going to put you in prison if you don't try it. You're not going to get penalized by some system of authority. You're not going to stop breathing because you didn't try to be a singer-songwriter. So there are less imperative things motivating you, right? To motivate you to go down that path. And I think that when it's on that level of trial, it is something even more special because you're putting yourself through those versions of hell or whatever you want to call them, those Herculean tasks, because it's something you really want to achieve. The other trials are things that we perhaps would never have chosen to walk down those paths, be presented with those barriers or challenges or however we're going to describe them. That's a completely other kind of resilience and heroism and accomplishment when you are able to surmount those difficulties.
Right. I mean, we can definitely say that we chose these career paths. I am a little bit of a skeptic when it comes to that, too.
Do we really have a choice, really?
I kind of believe that it's part of who we are. It's in our DNA.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
So we have a choice to either, step up and give it a shot because it's our calling,
Right.
or yes. But I agree with you that there is no failure to trying. So
Well, there's that. Yeah.
Right.
But a lot of people, I think, I think it's unfortunately true, live, as you were saying, this what-if life. They're stuck in that sense that they knew that there was something else to what they wanted to do with their time on this planet.
Yes, and usually that threat comes from someone else.
Usually some exterior thing that they're trying to satisfy, or inner doubt. But
instead of
Okay, well this was a great part 1, and we'll deal with part 2. We'll explore and talk about part 2 in our next episode of The Heart of the Cards. Eric, thank you so much for being a great person to talk to.
Yes, thank you, Dan. Great stories today.
Yeah,
I really appreciate those.
Yeah, we'll pick it up next time.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of the Cards with Dan Green and Eric Stuart. We hope this conversation in some way spoke to you. Whatever your journey, we look forward to crossing paths again in the next episode. This is Veronica Taylor, and on behalf of Andromeda Productions, we wish you well.
Andromeda, always a sound choice.